Henry Caldwell existed in a perpetual twilight. His small apartment was a cave. Thick curtains, once a deep burgundy, now faded and heavy, perpetually blocked the sun. They were a statement, a declaration against the outside world. The only light came from the flickering screens. Monitors glowed with cascading lines of text. News feeds scrolled endlessly. Obscure forums blinked with new urgent posts. The air was thick with the smell of old paper, stale coffee, and the faint metallic tang of overworked electronics. It was the aroma of a mind consumed, a life lived on the fringes of accepted reality, a personal quest taken to its extreme. Piles of books threatened to collapse. They were not ordinary books. Their titles spoke of conspiracies, hidden histories, and forgotten truths. Newspapers, yellowed and brittle, were stacked high. Each one was marked with red ink, circles, underlines, frantic scribbles in the margins. VHS tapes and DVDs lay scattered. They were labeled with cryptic codes, interviews with supposed whistleblowers, grainy footage of unexplained phenomena. Henry moved through this labyrinth of his own making with a practiced, weary gait. He was a curator of secrets, a guardian of the discarded, a lonely sentinel in a world he no longer trusted. He rarely spoke. When he did, his voice was a low rasp. It was unused to forming words for others. His interactions were mostly digital, anonymous exchanges in the dark corners of the internet. There, he was not Henry, the recluse. He was Oracle, or Seeker 72. He was a voice among other voices. All of them were searching. All of them were convinced that something vital was being kept from them. This shared paranoia was a strange comfort. It was a fragile connection in a life defined by disconnection, a silent acknowledgement of a shared, unseen enemy. His appearance mirrored his surroundings. His clothes were rumpled, his hair was unkempt. His eyes, though, burned with a fierce intelligence. They were the eyes of a hunter, always scanning, always analyzing, looking for the pattern in the static, the truth hidden beneath layers of deception. He was a man haunted by questions, questions that gnawed at him day and night. He believed the answers were out there, somewhere in the noise, somewhere in the darkness. He just had to keep looking. He had to find them before it was too late, or before he completely unraveled. Once, Henry Caldwell had designed bridges, real, tangible structures of steel and concrete. He understood stress points. He understood load distribution. He understood the precise calculations needed to connect two separate pieces of land. His mind was sharp, analytical, grounded in logic and physics. He had a promising career, a life that made sense, a future that seemed solid, predictable, and reassuringly normal. He built things that people used, things people trusted. He was a man of order, a creator of stability in a world that seemed, at least on the surface, to function according to established rules. Then came the losses, a swift, brutal series of them. His wife, claimed by an illness doctors couldn't explain quickly enough. His parents, gone in a sudden, senseless accident. The foundations of his world crumbled. The blueprints of his life were torn to shreds. The order he cherished dissolved into chaos. Grief was a chasm. It swallowed him whole. The bridges he once designed now seemed like mocking symbols. They represented connections he no longer had. They spanned voids he couldn't cross. His faith in predictable outcomes, in the reliable nature of existence, shattered. The world, once a place of clear lines and understandable mechanics, became opaque. He started to see cracks in the veneer of normalcy. The explanations offered by authorities, by the media, by the so-called experts felt hollow. They felt insufficient. They felt like carefully constructed narratives designed to soothe, not to reveal. His engineer's mind, trained to find flaws in structures, began to find flaws in the structure of reality itself. He started to question everything he had once accepted without a second thought. The world around him seemed to shimmer with an unsettling insubstantiality. His grief slowly, insidiously, morphed into suspicion. It was a way to channel the pain, a way to find a target for his anger and confusion. If the world wasn't what it seemed, then perhaps his losses weren't random. Perhaps they were part of something larger, something hidden. This thought, terrifying as it was, offered a strange kind of solace. It suggested a pattern. It suggested that there was an order, albeit a sinister one, behind the chaos. And so, the engineer who once built bridges began a new solitary project to dismantle the facade of reality and find what lay beneath. Henry's quest began slowly. It started with late nights. He pored over alternative news sites. He delved into forgotten history books. He watched documentaries that never saw a mainstream release. He was looking for inconsistencies. He was searching for the threads that didn't quite line up. The official stories seemed too neat, too polished, like a perfectly constructed bridge with no visible stress points. But he knew that every structure had its weaknesses. Every narrative had its holes. He just needed to find them. His apartment began its transformation then, from a home into a command center for his solitary war against perceived deception. His distrust of mainstream sources grew with each passing day. He saw their reports not as information, but as carefully curated messages. He believed they were designed to maintain control, to keep the populace docile and unquestioning. He started to see patterns, repeated phrases, omitted details. He cross-referenced everything. He compared official statements with eyewitness accounts found on obscure blogs. He looked for the discrepancies, the small telltale signs that something was amiss. His engineering skills were now repurposed. He was reverse engineering the truth, or what he believed to be the truth, from the fragments he could gather. His isolation deepened. Friends, colleagues, the few family members he had left, they couldn't understand his growing obsession. They saw him retreating. They saw him becoming consumed by dark theories. Their concern felt like another form of control to him, another attempt to pull him back into the world he was trying to escape. He stopped answering their calls. He avoided their visits. He needed focus. He needed to be free from their well-meaning but ultimately distracting influence. His world shrank to the confines of his cluttered apartment and the vast anonymous expanse of the internet. The hidden truths he sought were varied and often contradictory. Alien visitations, shadow governments, secret societies pulling the strings of global events, ancient technologies suppressed by powerful elites. He didn't necessarily subscribe to all of them, but he believed that the very existence of these theories pointed to a larger underlying reality. A reality where the powerful few manipulated the unsuspecting many. His search was no longer just about his personal losses. It was about uncovering a fundamental deception. A deception that, he believed, affected everyone, whether they knew it or not. The internet became Henry's primary hunting ground. He navigated its depths like a seasoned explorer charting unknown territories. He found solace in encrypted chat rooms and password-protected forums. These were places where others like him gathered, others who saw the cracks in the world. They shared snippets of information. They traded theories. They offered cryptic warnings. He learned their language, a language of codes, of hints, of carefully worded allusions. It was a subculture built on shared distrust and a relentless pursuit of what they called the signal in the noise. He felt a sense of belonging there, however tenuous. His obsession intensified, feeding on the digital breadcrumbs he meticulously collected. Sleep became a luxury he could rarely afford. His days and nights blurred into a continuous cycle of research, analysis, and online communication. He developed a keen eye for spotting anomalies in data streams. He could detect subtle manipulations in images and videos. He cross-referenced IP addresses. He traced digital footprints. He was no longer just a passive consumer of information. He was an active participant in the hunt, a digital detective sifting through mountains of data for that one elusive clue, that one piece of evidence that would confirm his darkest suspicions. He began to see connections everywhere. A news report about a financial crisis might, in his mind, link to an obscure historical text about a secret banking cabal. A scientific breakthrough could be interpreted as a cover for a more sinister technological development. His mind, once dedicated to the precise logic of engineering, now excelled at weaving together disparate pieces of information into elaborate tapestries of conspiracy. The world was a puzzle, and he was convinced he was slowly finding the pieces, even if the picture they formed was terrifying. His isolation was now a fortress, protecting his fragile theories from the skepticism of the outside world. The lines between reality and his interpretation of it began to blur. Was he uncovering genuine secrets, or was he constructing a reality that conformed to his grief-fueled paranoia? He rarely considered this question. To do so would be to doubt his entire purpose. His quest had become his identity. He was the man who saw what others didn't. The man who dared to look behind the curtain. This conviction, however isolating, gave him a sense of importance, a reason to keep going even as his physical world shrank and his social ties withered away to almost nothing. He was on a mission, and the mission was everything. One unusually quiet Tuesday morning, or perhaps it was afternoon, the concept of time had become fluid for Henry. A new message appeared. It wasn't on any of his usual forums. It wasn't an email from a known contact. It arrived through a heavily encrypted, anonymous messaging service he rarely used. The notification sound was jarring. A single, sharp chime that cut through the usual hum of his electronics. He stared at the screen. The sender ID was a string of random characters. The subject line was blank. His heart began to beat a little faster. This felt different. This felt significant. The message itself was brief, terse, almost poetic in its starkness. "You seek the core," it read, "the foundation upon which the illusions are built. We have observed your diligence. We know your questions." Henry read it again. And again. His mind raced. Who were we? How did they know about his search? He had always been careful. He used proxies. He encrypted his communications. Yet, here was a message that suggested he was not as invisible as he thought. A chill ran down his spine, a mixture of fear and a strange, unsettling excitement. This was not the usual chatter of his online groups. The message continued, providing a set of coordinates. Not a physical address, just a string of numbers, latitude and longitude, and a time. Tomorrow, sundown, be alone. There were no threats, no demands, just an invitation or perhaps a summons. Henry felt a knot tighten in his stomach. This was it. This was what he had been working towards. Or was it? For years he had chased shadows. He had pieced together fragments. Now it seemed something or someone was reaching out from the very heart of the mystery he was trying to solve. His initial reaction was a surge of validation. His theories weren't just wild speculation. His obsessive research hadn't been in vain. Someone knew. Someone understood. But beneath the validation, a seed of profound unease began to sprout. The truth he had sought from a distance, as an abstract concept, was now beckoning him. It was offering to reveal itself. And suddenly, the prospect of confronting it directly felt overwhelming. The comfort of the chase, the intellectual exercise of his quest, was about to be replaced by something far more concrete and potentially far more dangerous. The coordinates led him to an abandoned observatory, perched on a hill overlooking the city. It was a relic of a more optimistic age, when humanity looked to the stars for answers, not to the dark corners of the internet. Henry arrived as the sun began to dip below the horizon. The sky was a bruised purple and the air was cold. He was, as instructed, alone. Clutching a heavy flashlight, its beam cut a nervous path through the encroaching darkness. The observatory dome was a skeletal silhouette against the fading light. He felt exposed, vulnerable, a stark contrast to the fortified anonymity of his apartment. She was waiting inside, standing near the rusted controls of the massive, silent telescope. A woman, her features indistinct in the gloom. She was cloaked, or perhaps it was just the way the shadows clung to her. She didn't startle when he entered. She seemed to have been expecting him. There was an unnerving stillness about her. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice calm, even, holding no discernible emotion. It was not the voice he expected. It was not the voice of a fellow conspiracist, nor of a shadowy puppet master. It was simply a voice. "You've been looking for something," she continued, her gaze fixed on him. It was not a question. "You believe the world is not what it seems. You believe there are hidden truths." Henry found himself unable to speak. His carefully constructed theories, his years of research, suddenly felt inadequate. Childish, even. In her presence, the abstract became terrifyingly real. He could only nod. He was a man who trafficked in words, in data, and speculation. But faced with this tangible manifestation of his quest, he was rendered mute. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically. She held out a small, ornate wooden box. "This is what you've been searching for," she said. "The key. Not a metaphorical key, Mr. Caldwell. The actual key." Her words hung in the cold, dusty air. "It unlocks the door to the core, to the foundation you spoke of in your writings. It will show you everything. The why, the how, the who." She placed the box on a nearby ledge. It sat there, small and unassuming, yet radiating an immense unspoken power. The choice, of course, is yours, to know, or to continue wondering. Henry stared at the small wooden box. It seemed innocuous, yet it pulsed with a silent promise, a promise of ultimate revelation. This was the culmination of his life's work, the answer to every question that had haunted him since his world fell apart. The truth, contained and offered. His hand trembled as he reached for it. The wood was smooth, cool to the touch. He could feel a faint vibration from within, or perhaps it was just the thrumming of his own accelerated pulse. He had imagined this moment countless times, but the reality of it was far heavier, far more daunting than any of his fantasies. The woman watched him, her expression unreadable in the dim light. She offered no encouragement, no warnings, just silent observation. Her presence was a constant reminder of the gravity of the situation. This was not a game. This was not another forum post to dissect. This was a point of no return. If he opened that box, if he used that key, his life, his understanding of everything would be irrevocably altered. The knowledge he craved, the truth he had sacrificed so much for, was now within his grasp. But a new, unexpected emotion surged within him. Fear, a profound, visceral fear of what he might discover. What if the truth was worse than anything he had imagined? What if it was so vast, so incomprehensible that it shattered his sanity? Or what if, perversely, it was mundane? What if the grand conspiracies were just the chaotic, meaningless actions of flawed individuals? Would that be even more unbearable? The intricate web of theories he had woven provided a strange kind of order. A sinister order, perhaps, but order nonetheless. The truth, raw and unfiltered, might offer only chaos, or an emptiness that would swallow him whole, leaving him with nothing. He thought of his old life, the life of blueprints and bridges, a life of knowable things, a life he had abandoned in his grief and suspicion. He had sought truth to make sense of his losses. But what if the truth offered no sense at all? What if it only deepened the void? The key felt heavy in his hand. It was not just a piece of metal or wood. It was the weight of all possible knowledge, the burden of seeing behind the curtain. And for the first time, Henry Caldwell wondered if some doors were best left unopened, if some illusions were necessary for survival. The silence in the observatory stretched. It was broken only by the sound of Henry's ragged breathing and the distant hum of the city below. He turned the box over and over in his hands. He could feel the intricate carvings on its surface. It was undeniably real. The woman remained still, a silent sentinel, a gatekeeper to a reality he wasn't sure he was prepared to face. His mind was a battlefield. Years of obsessive searching screamed at him to open it, to take the final step, to vindicate his journey, to finally know. This was his purpose. This was his destiny. But another voice, quieter, more hesitant, whispered of the abyss. It spoke of the peace of not knowing, the strange comfort of the familiar shadows he inhabited. His cluttered apartment, his flickering screens, his anonymous online comrades, they were his world. A world he understood in his own way. A world he could navigate. What lay beyond the door this key unlocked? Would it be a world he could even comprehend, let alone exist in? The allure of ignorance, once an enemy to be vanquished, now presented itself as a seductive, comforting alternative. A haven from the potentially crushing weight of ultimate truth. He thought of the faces of his wife and parents. Their loss had set him on this path. He had wanted answers. He had wanted justice. He had wanted something, anything, to make sense of the senseless. Would this key give him that? Or would it simply reveal a universe indifferent to his pain? A mechanism too vast and impersonal to care about individual tragedies? The desire to know was a burning fire. But the fear of what that knowledge might do to him, to the fragile remnants of his sanity, was a cold, paralyzing dread. He was caught between two unbearable possibilities. The woman finally spoke, her voice still neutral, still devoid of judgment. The truth has a price, Mr. Caldwell. It always does. Some find it liberating. Others find it unbearable. The choice is not about courage or cowardice. It is about what you can live with. Her words cut through his internal turmoil. What could he live with? Could he live with the gnawing uncertainty forever? Or could he live with a truth that might destroy him? He looked at the key, then at the shadowy form of the woman, and then out through a crack in the observatory wall towards the distant, oblivious city. Slowly, deliberately, Henry placed the small wooden box back on the dusty ledge. The decision, when it finally came, was not a dramatic revelation. It was a quiet subsidence, a weary acceptance. The fire of his obsession, which had burned so fiercely for so long, seemed to dim, leaving behind a landscape of cold embers and a profound sense of exhaustion. He had chased the truth to the very edge of its revelation. He had peered into the abyss, and he had chosen to step back. The weight of the unknown, he realized, was perhaps more bearable than the weight of a truth he might not survive. He looked at the woman. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse. It was all he could manage. He didn't know if he was thanking her for the offer, or for her silent understanding, or perhaps for simply being the catalyst that brought him to this precipice. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. There was no judgment in her eyes, no disappointment, only a calm, knowing stillness. It was as if she had seen this outcome many times before, as if the choice he made was just one of many paths in a complex, branching reality. He turned and walked out of the observatory. He didn't look back. The cold night air felt clean on his face. The city lights, once a symbol of the oblivious masses, now seemed almost welcoming. He walked down the hill, his steps heavy but steady. He was returning to his world, his cluttered apartment, his flickering screens, his theories. They would still be there, but something had shifted within him. The desperate urgency was gone, replaced by a quiet resignation, a bittersweet understanding that some mysteries were perhaps meant to remain unsolved, some veils best left unlifted. Back in his dimly lit den, the familiar chaos felt different. It was no longer a battle station. It felt more like a refuge, a known quantity. He sat before his monitors, the glow illuminating his tired face. The online forums were still buzzing with theories, with whispers, with urgent calls for discovery. He watched them scroll by, but the words no longer held the same power over him. He had been offered the ultimate answer, and he had chosen his own version of peace. The truth was out there, perhaps, but Henry Caldwell had decided that, for him, some truths were best left in the dark, where they could be endlessly pondered but never fully known.